Police corruption is a pervasive issue that plagues many countries around the world, and South Africa is no exception. This video aims to shed light on the extent of police corruption in South Africa, arguing that it is a significant problem that requires urgent attention. While the tone of this essay will be informal, the argument will be based on factual evidence and logical reasoning. Police officers serve as the guardians of law and order in society, entrusted with the responsibility to protect and serve their communities. However, when police officers engage in corrupt practices, such as accepting bribes, it undermines the very essence of their role and has far-reaching negative consequences. This essay explores the detrimental impact of police officers taking bribes, including the erosion of public trust, compromised law enforcement, perpetuation of systemic corruption, and the violation of human rights. One of the most significant consequences of police officers accepting bribes is the erosion of public trust. Trust is the bedrock of effective policing, as it relies on the belief that law enforcement officers will act impartially and in the best interest of the community. When police officers accept bribes, they betray this trust and undermine the public's confidence in the entire law enforcement system. The perception that police officers are corrupt erodes cooperation, hindering crime reporting and collaboration between the community and the police. Bribery within the police force compromises the effectiveness of law enforcement efforts. When police officers prioritize personal gain over their duty to uphold the law, it leads to a skewed allocation of resources and a neglect of genuine law enforcement priorities. Criminals who can afford to pay bribes may evade arrest or receive preferential treatment, while the marginalized and vulnerable populations suffer from inadequate protection. This compromise in law enforcement weakens the overall security and safety of society. Police officers accepting bribes perpetuate a culture of corruption within law enforcement agencies. It creates a vicious cycle in which corrupt practices become normalized and accepted as the status quo. The presence of systemic corruption undermines the integrity of the entire justice system, compromising the rule of law. It hampers efforts to combat other forms of corruption in society, as the very institutions responsible for combating corruption become complicit in perpetuating it. The acceptance of bribes by police officers often results in the violation of human rights. When law enforcement officers prioritize personal gain over their duty to protect and serve, they may engage in a range of human rights abuses. This includes arbitrary arrests, harassment, and abuse of power, particularly targeting vulnerable populations. The violation of human rights not only harms individuals directly affected, but also erodes the principles of justice and equality upon which societies are built. Police officers taking bribes undermine the foundations of democracy and the rule of law. In a democratic society, the police play a crucial role in upholding justice, protecting citizens' rights, and ensuring equal treatment under the law. When police officers engage in corrupt practices, it erodes public confidence in the justice system, undermines the legitimacy of democratic institutions, and perpetuates a sense of impunity. This erosion of trust and the compromised rule of law weaken the democratic fabric of society. The negative impact of police officers taking bribes is far-reaching and undermines the very essence of their role as protectors of the community. It erodes public trust, compromises effective law enforcement, perpetuates systemic corruption, violates human rights, and undermines democracy and the rule of law. Addressing this issue requires comprehensive reforms, including robust internal accountability mechanisms, anti-corruption measures, ethical training, and the promotion of a culture of integrity within law enforcement agencies. When corruption infiltrates law enforcement agencies, the consequences are dire. In South Africa, the shocking revelation of police officers engaging in drug dealing is a grave concern that undermines the very fabric of society. This video delves into the negative impact of police officers dealing drugs in South Africa, including the erosion of public trust, compromised law enforcement efforts, exacerbation of drug-related problems, and the perpetuation of systemic corruption. The involvement of police officers in drug dealing severely erodes public trust in law enforcement agencies. The police play a vital role in maintaining law and order and safeguarding communities. However, when those entrusted to uphold the law become active participants in criminal activities, it shatters the trust citizens have in the police force. The perception of corrupt police officers undermines cooperation, as individuals become hesitant to report crimes or seek assistance from law enforcement, fearing reprisals or lack of action. Police officers dealing drugs compromise the effectiveness of law enforcement efforts in combating drug-related crimes. These officers divert resources and attention away from the very issues they should be addressing. Their involvement in drug trafficking allows criminal networks to flourish as they benefit from inside information, protection, and reduced risk of detection. Consequently, drug dealers evade arrest, and drug-related crimes proliferate, posing significant threats to public safety and security. The involvement of police officers in drug dealing exacerbates the already complex drug-related problems in South Africa. Their participation perpetuates the availability and accessibility of illicit substances, contributing to the expansion of drug markets. This, in turn, leads to increased drug abuse, addiction rates, and associated health and social issues. Police officers who deal drugs not only contribute to the problem but also exploit vulnerable populations, perpetuating a cycle of substance abuse and victimization. The revelation of police officers dealing drugs highlights the deep-rooted issue of systemic corruption within law enforcement agencies. It signifies a breakdown of ethical conduct, as officers sworn to uphold the law become complicit in criminal activities. The presence of systemic corruption erodes the integrity and credibility of the entire justice system, hindering efforts to combat crime and corruption more broadly. It perpetuates a culture of impunity, where the very institutions responsible for maintaining law and order become agents of criminality. The involvement of police officers in drug dealing undermines the foundations of democracy and the rule of law in South Africa. In a democratic society, the police play a vital role in protecting citizens' rights, ensuring equal treatment under the law, and upholding justice. When police officers engage in criminal activities, including drug dealing, it erodes public confidence in the justice system, undermines the legitimacy of democratic institutions, and perpetuates a culture of lawlessness. This erosion weakens the democratic fabric of society and hampers efforts to create a just and equitable nation. The alarming reality of police officers dealing drugs in South Africa has severe consequences for society as a whole. It erodes public trust, compromises law enforcement efforts, exacerbates drug-related problems, and perpetuates systemic corruption. Addressing this issue requires robust internal accountability mechanisms, rigorous anti-corruption measures, enhanced vetting processes, and ethical training within law enforcement agencies. Police brutality is a grave concern that plagues societies around the world, and South Africa is no exception. Despite significant progress made in dismantling apartheid and establishing a democratic society, the country continues to grapple with the pervasive issue of police brutality. This video aims to shed light on the negative impact of police brutality in South Africa, focusing on the erosion of trust in law enforcement, the violation of human rights, and the perpetuation of systemic inequality. Police brutality undermines public trust in law enforcement agencies, creating a gulf between the police and the communities they are meant to serve and protect. The excessive use of force, racial profiling, and unlawful arrests erode the confidence citizens have in the police, making them less likely to cooperate or report crimes. This breakdown in trust hampers effective crime prevention and investigation, ultimately compromising public safety. Police brutality in South Africa often leads to the violation of fundamental human rights. The use of excessive force or torture violates the rights to life, liberty, and security of the person, as enshrined in the country's constitution. Instances of extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, and custodial abuses have been reported, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation among the population. Such violations not only harm individuals directly affected, but also undermine the principles of justice and equality. Police brutality disproportionately affects marginalized communities, perpetuating systemic inequality in South Africa. Historically disadvantaged groups, such as Black South Africans and those living in impoverished areas, bear the brunt of police violence. Racial profiling and discriminatory practices further entrench social divisions, deepening the sense of injustice and exclusion experienced by these communities. The cycle of violence and oppression perpetuated by police brutality exacerbates existing socioeconomic disparities and hinders progress towards a more equitable society. Victims of police brutality often suffer severe physical and psychological trauma. The use of excessive force, torture, and ill treatment can result in physical injuries, ranging from bruises and broken bones to permanent disabilities, or even death. Beyond physical harm, survivors may experience long-lasting emotional distress, including anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and a loss of trust in authority figures. The ripple effects of police brutality extend beyond the immediate victims, affecting families and communities and perpetuating a cycle of violence and trauma. Police brutality undermines the foundations of democracy and respect for human rights in South Africa. It erodes the rule of law as law enforcement agencies tasked with upholding justice become perpetrators of violence and abuse. When those responsible for protecting citizens engage in unlawful acts, it erodes the credibility and legitimacy of the entire justice system. It is essential to hold accountable those who abuse their power to maintain the integrity of democratic institutions and safeguard citizens' rights. The negative impact of police brutality in South Africa is far-reaching and multifaceted. It erodes trust in law enforcement, violates human rights, perpetuates systemic inequality, and undermines democracy and justice. Addressing police brutality requires comprehensive reforms, including increased accountability, improved training, and the promotion of community policing models. By taking decisive action to address this issue, South Africa can work towards a society where all citizens can live free from fear. A disheartening practice has emerged within the law enforcement system: the sale of police dockets. This essay aims to explore the issue of police dockets being sold for personal gain, examining its implications, underlying causes, and potential solutions. Police dockets contain crucial information and evidence related to criminal investigations. The sale of these dockets by corrupt police officers has severe consequences for the justice system and society as a whole. When dockets are sold, crucial evidence can be tampered with, destroyed, or deliberately overlooked. This compromises the integrity of investigations and undermines the ability to hold perpetrators accountable. The sale of dockets can lead to wrongful convictions as the evidence is manipulated or withheld, resulting in innocent individuals being punished for crimes they did not commit. The sale of police dockets erodes public trust in law enforcement agencies. Citizens lose confidence in the justice system, perceiving it as corrupt and ineffective, which hampers the fight against crime. When perpetrators can evade justice by purchasing or influencing dockets, it perpetuates a culture of impunity. This sends a message that individuals with financial resources can manipulate the system to escape accountability. Several factors contribute to the sale of police dockets in South Africa. Widespread corruption within law enforcement agencies provides fertile ground for the sale of dockets. Organized criminal networks may exploit these corrupt officers to protect their activities and impede investigations. Inadequate remuneration and challenging working conditions for police officers can create an environment where some resort to unethical practices to supplement their income. Weak internal oversight mechanisms and a culture of impunity allow corrupt officers to operate with minimal fear of consequences. This fosters an environment where dockets can be sold without fear of being caught. Addressing the problem of docket sales requires a multifaceted approach involving various stakeholders. Implementing robust anti-corruption measures within law enforcement agencies, including thorough vetting processes, independent internal affairs units, and strict disciplinary actions, can help deter and punish officers involved in docket sales. Improving the remuneration and working conditions of police officers can reduce their susceptibility to corruption. Adequate pay and supportive environments can discourage the temptation to engage in illicit activities. Establishing mechanisms to protect whistleblowers who expose docket sales is crucial. Safeguards can encourage officers and civilians to come forward with information and evidence, ensuring accountability for those involved. Raising awareness among the public about the consequences of docket sales and the importance of reporting such incidents can foster a culture of intolerance towards corruption. Engaging communities in anti-corruption initiatives can strengthen the fight against this practice. The sale of police dockets in South Africa represents a betrayal of justice and a serious threat to the rule. South Africa, known for its diverse culture and struggling socio-economic conditions, experiences numerous challenges related to immigration. Unfortunately, one distressing issue that has come to light is the extortion of money from immigrants by the police. This video aims to shed light on this concerning practice, discussing its causes, consequences, and potential solutions. Causes of police extortion. Several factors contribute to the prevalence of police extortion targeting immigrants in South Africa. Corruption within law enforcement agencies breeds an environment where officers abuse their power for personal gain. A lack of transparency and accountability mechanisms allows such misconduct to persist unchecked. South Africa faces significant socio-economic challenges, including high unemployment rates and income inequality. These issues can create an environment where police officers resort to extortion as a means of supplementing their incomes. Deep-rooted prejudices and xenophobia against immigrants in South Africa contribute to the targeting of individuals from other countries. Police officers may exploit these biases to extort money from vulnerable immigrants. Consequences of police extortion. The extortion of money from immigrants by the police has numerous adverse consequences. Immigrants, already facing various challenges, become even more vulnerable when subjected to extortion. They are forced to pay bribes, perpetuating a cycle of exploitation and perpetuating their marginalization. The actions of corrupt police officers erode trust in law enforcement agencies and undermine their legitimacy in the eyes of both immigrants and the broader community. This further hampers efforts to maintain law and order. Police extortion reinforces negative stereotypes about immigrants, perpetuating discrimination and marginalization. It deepens societal divisions and damages social cohesion. Establishing and enforcing strict codes of conduct within law enforcement agencies is essential. This includes promoting transparency, implementing anti-corruption measures, and holding officers accountable for their actions. Providing comprehensive training to police officers on human rights, diversity, and cultural sensitivity is crucial. This will help foster a more inclusive and respectful approach towards immigrants, reducing the likelihood of extortion. Reviewing and updating existing laws and regulations to address police misconduct and corruption is necessary. This should involve penalties for officers involved in extortion, as well as safeguards to protect victims and witnesses who come forward. Encouraging dialogue and collaboration between law enforcement agencies, immigrant communities, and civil society organizations can help build trust and promote understanding. This engagement can foster joint efforts to combat police extortion and address the underlying causes. The extortion of money from immigrants by the police in South Africa is a distressing issue that demands urgent attention. It not only exploits vulnerable individuals, but also undermines trust in law enforcement and perpetuates discrimination. By implementing systemic reforms, promoting transparency, and fostering dialogue, South Africa can work towards eradicating police extortion and creating a more inclusive and just society for all. Firstly, it is important to acknowledge that police corruption in South Africa is a complex issue with deep-rooted causes. The legacy of apartheid, high levels of poverty, and inadequate training and resources contribute to an environment where corruption can thrive. This argument is not meant to excuse corruption, but rather to understand its origins and address them effectively. One of the most prevalent forms of police corruption in South Africa is bribery. Officers often demand bribes from citizens in exchange for turning a blind eye to illegal activities or providing preferential treatment. This practice undermines the rule of law and erodes public trust in the police force. Furthermore, it perpetuates a culture of impunity, where those with money and connections can evade justice. Another form of corruption is the misuse of police resources for personal gain. This includes the theft of confiscated drugs or goods, as well as the misuse of police vehicles and equipment. Such actions not only compromise the effectiveness of law enforcement but also contribute to the erosion of public confidence in the police force. Furthermore, police brutality is a grave concern in South Africa. While not all instances of police violence can be attributed to corruption, there are cases where officers abuse their power for personal reasons or to protect their own interests. This abuse of authority not only violates the rights of citizens, but also perpetuates a cycle of violence and mistrust. To combat police corruption, several measures need to be implemented. Firstly, there must be a commitment from the government to address the root causes of corruption, such as poverty and inadequate training. Adequate funding should be allocated to improve police salaries, training programs, and resources. This will help attract and retain qualified officers who are less susceptible to corruption. Additionally, there should be a strong emphasis on accountability and transparency within the police force. Independent oversight bodies should be established to investigate and prosecute corrupt officers. Whistleblower protection programs should also be implemented to encourage officers to report corruption without fear of retaliation. Moreover, community engagement is crucial in the fight against police corruption. Building trust between the police and the community through open dialogue, community policing initiatives, and awareness campaigns can help bridge the gap and reduce corruption. Citizens should be encouraged to report instances of corruption and be assured that their complaints will be taken seriously. In conclusion, police corruption in South Africa is a significant problem that requires urgent attention. The legacy of apartheid, poverty, and inadequate resources contribute to an environment where corruption can thrive. However, by addressing the root causes, implementing accountability measures, and fostering community engagement, it is possible to combat police corruption effectively. It is essential for the government, law enforcement agencies, and citizens to work together to restore public trust and ensure a fair and just society for all South Africans.